Welcome to another Elder Watch mini-series. This video is part of the Less Common Scams of 2024 series, and today we'll be talking about employment scams. Elder Watch is a 20-plus year collaboration between AARP and the Colorado Attorney General's Office. We work to protect and educate older Coloradans by providing information and resources surrounding fraud and financial literacy all over the state of Colorado. If you or someone you know has been the victim of an employment scam or any other type of scam or fraud, go ahead and give us a phone call. We would love to help you out, give you some resources, some peace of mind, and help you move on from this period in your life. If you'd like to contact us, our phone number is 800-222-4444, select option 2. My name is Jessica Zawadsky, and I am the program specialist for Elder Watch Colorado. So employment scams are not necessarily new, but they don't tend to crack our top 10 in terms of the most common types of scams that we get. Nonetheless, they are still a very, very, very big deal. So today we're going to start with talking about why. Why am I telling you about employment scams? Why is this an important thing for you to know about? Second, we'll talk about some of the most popular jobs that are used in scams. So I'm calling it the most popular scam jobs. After that, we'll talk about general employment scams and some of the red flags that you'll see within these scams that indicate that the job you're applying for, the job you just accepted, might not be real. After that, we'll talk about some of the real life calls that we've gotten here on the helpline. Next, we'll talk about ghost jobs, which in themselves are not a scam, but if you apply for a ghost job, you're still not going to get a job. So the outcome is kind of similar, and it's just something good to look out for when we're talking about looking for jobs and finding employment. And then we'll end with what to do if you experience an employment scam. So if you've watched any of the other videos in this series, you know that I'm talking about scams that don't crack our top 10, but that doesn't mean that they're not devastating financially, emotionally, just for people's lives in general. And I feel that if we don't talk about them as much, the red flags are a little bit harder for us to identify. So employment scams, part of the reason that, firstly, I want to talk about this, is that they're always evolving. As technology changes, as the job market changes, scammers are changing too. So I think it's worthwhile to touch base on at least what we know now to help protect you, as what the scam looks like on the outside changed, but the core tends to stay the same. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that core. So regardless of how things evolve, you'll be equipped to help suss out employment scams. The second reason I want to talk about employment scams is between 2022 and 2023, job scams and employment scams rose by 118%, and consumers reported losing $367 million in 2022, though, as with many scams, we know that these numbers are underreported. So just the sheer frequency, or I should say, the fact that they are climbing, they might crack our top 10, in a couple months, but this is a growing problem, as well as a problem that is taking a lot of money from people who are already trying to make more money by looking for a job. So I think it's really important, given the trajectory of employment scams, that we talk a little bit about them. Thirdly, on average, employment scam victims lose about $2,000 per scam, but stand to potentially lose even more given the potential exposure of an individual's personal and financial information. So as we dig in a little bit deeper in terms of what these scams tend to look like, you'll see that a lot of information is usually exchanged. So even if you only lose $2,000 in the first portion of the scam, and then you realize it's a scam, scammers now have your personal and financial information. So if you don't catch it right away, if you don't protect yourself, you potentially stand to lose even more, which I think is a really good reason to talk about employment scams. So next, we're going to talk about some of the popular jobs that are scammed and the jobs that we tend to see when it comes to employment scams. There are many different types of jobs that scammers might utilize in an employment scam, but the 4 jobs that we're going to talk about right now are the ones that are frequently used by scammers when they're making bogus postings. Now, that doesn't mean that these jobs are always a scam. I mean more that scammers like to use this type of job when they're trying to create a scam. So, some of the most common jobs that we see in employment scams are work from home jobs, secret shopper jobs, receive, repackage, and reship jobs. So, like for example, you might be sent a product, you need to put it in a different kind of box and then ship it back out. And then car wrap jobs are also very common jobs that are used in employment scams. Now, like I said, if you see this job posting, it's not necessarily a scam, but if you see this job posting with some of the red flags that we're going to look out, you should definitely be a little bit wary before you exchange any personal or financial information with that organization. All right, so the first general employment scam and red flag that we'll talk about is a position says it will pay you significantly more than you would ordinarily expect for that position. So, for example, if the position is saying it's going to pay you double what you would expect to be paid for that job, that might sound really nice, but it's definitely suspicious. Now, this one all by itself doesn't necessarily mean that it's a scam, but if you see that a job is offering you way more money than you would normally expect, and then you see another one of these red flags that we're talking about, you should proceed with caution, be very wary. The second red flag that I want to talk about when it comes to employment scams is that you never hear or see the individual who is interviewing you. In other words, if the only interview you ever have with a company that you're planning to work for is via text message, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, it is highly likely that the position is a scam, especially if they offer you the job without ever having talked to you in person, on the phone, via video chat. Really shady. And so if it's that plus offering you way more money than you expected, probably a scam. Now, though some positions may require you to purchase, for example, specific licensures or certifications before the job, if a company asks you to purchase special equipment or if they send you a check for said special equipment, probably a scam, especially if they send you a check. Let's say they say the equipment you need is $1,000. They send you a check for $1,400 and they say you can keep the difference. Scam. The next red flag I want to talk about is being ghosted. And maybe this one is kind of intuitive, but let's say you apply for a job, you send in all your stuff. They say, oh my gosh, fantastic. You've got that job. Your start date is this upcoming Monday. And then you never hear from them. You got no information about what you're supposed to do on that first day, who you should touch base with. Red flag. Now, this last one that I want to talk about is pretty specific to employment scams, and I would say maybe like fake imposter scam, imposter business scams as well. And this one is that if, let's say you're approached by, I don't know, let's say ABC Logistics, and you're looking at this position online, but you can't find a digital footprint, highly suspicious. So let's think about this, right? Think about your favorite small local business. For me, it is my favorite plant shop in Denver, and they only have 4 employees, usually like 1 or 2 people on the floor. Now, even though that's a really small business, they still have a web presence. Not only do they have their own website, but there's places like Google that does reviews, or like Google Maps and Yelp and things like that. So if you are applying for a company and you cannot find anything about them online, especially if it's a work from home job, just think about that. If it's a work from home job, they should have something online because that's pretty much where the interaction, where the job is going to be, right? So if you're applying for a work from home job and you can't find anything about the company online, or maybe you only see like one review and the website looks like really unprofessional, very serious red flag. Again, especially if it's in conjunction with some of the other ones that we've talked about thus far. So cryptocurrency is all the rage, all over the place, and it's a growing component of a lot of scams and fraud, not just employment scams. But in employment scams, one red flag related to cryptocurrency is that if you are supposed to be paid through cryptocurrency and it's not a cryptocurrency job. So, for example, if it's a data entry job, but they say that you need to have a crypto wallet to get paid, red flag. Another red flag I want to talk about is a common component of lots of different types of scams, but it's a little bit different here. And in this one, I'm talking about inconsistencies in spelling and grammar. So if you see inconsistencies in spelling and grammar, kind of like in general, it might be a tip off of, for example, a romance scam. If you see inconsistencies in spelling and grammar in a job posting, that might also be a red flag. But another inconsistency might be in the recruiter or whoever you're talking to's email. So if someone is emailing you and they say that they're Google, but it's coming to you from, I don't know, like an Outlook address, or if they tell you that it's H&M, the clothing company, but the recruiter's email is a Gmail email, that is suspicious. Usually a company, and it's particularly a hiring manager, will have an email address that has their company in it, right? So for us, it might be at aarp.com, which it's not really what it is. But you would expect that if I'm hiring you for a job at ElderWatch, that my email would have ElderWatch in it, and that you wouldn't be getting my personal email if I'm recruiting you. So if you get, or if you're corresponding with a recruiter who has their personal email address, suspicious, and you should be wary that that might be a red flag. One more red flag that might seem flattering is that a recruiter reaches out to you for a company that you've never interacted with and or that is not in your field at all. Now, it's not uncommon for recruiters to approach candidates, particularly those who are looking for work or have updated a resume, but this is another one where by itself it might not be a scam, but if you see it in conjunction with some other things. So for example, if a recruiter reaches out to you, but their email address is at AOL.com, suspicious, that might be a red flag. Lastly, one huge red flag is being asked for your personal and financial information very early in the process, especially before doing an interview or being offered the position. So usually you are not asked to provide things like your social security number and banking and routing information until you've accepted the job, right? And usually it's through somebody in HR. But if you were asked to provide this information before you've done any of these steps, before you really secured things, suspicious, especially also if it's not on a document, like for example, a W-2. They just ask you to send over your banking and routing, might be a scam. Now that we know some of the red flags found within employment scams, let's get into some real life calls that we've received here on the Elder Watch helpline. So in this case, the caller was reached out to on Facebook Messenger for a work from home job for Johnson and Johnson. The caller received a message on Facebook Messenger about this job. Then they did a Skype interview with who they thought was the hiring manager and received emails afterwards from and I redacted the name, but from a Gmail email address. The caller then received a check for $2,450, which they deposited, but the check was flagged as fraudulent, and then the consumer never heard back from Johnson & Johnson. So this call alone has a ton of red flags. The first one being approached by a company that you have never interacted with or shown interest in. The second, right after, is that it was through Facebook. It's not common that a company would reach out to you with a job opportunity, particularly for a big company like Johnson & Johnson, right? Through Facebook Messenger. So that's already pretty suspicious. Now, the Skype interview does lend some legitimacy potentially to this scam, but the next piece takes it away. So the hiring agent is reaching out from a Gmail email address. Now, if you work for a company like Johnson & Johnson, don't you think that your email would be at johnsonandjohnson.com or johnsonandjohnson.org? So that's a little suspicious. And then we see this thing with the check. So presumably, though, I don't necessarily know from this call because I didn't get to talk to them, but presumably the caller was sent this check for $2,450 for special equipment that they would need to work from home for Johnson & Johnson. When they deposited it, which again, that's just a red flag by itself, the bank eventually flagged it as fraudulent. Now, what often happens is the caller will then be out that money. Their account is now in the negative. And then the last one is that this caller was effectively ghosted by the company after doing their dirty business. Here's another heard on the helpline. Let's see if you can spot some of the red flags as we go through it. So in this case, the caller was contacted by a logistics company about a job, but when he tried to call the number back, there was no voicemail set up. When the recruiter who initially contacted our caller called back, the caller's phone screener said that the call was likely from a scammer, or that it was likely a scam. The caller did find a website for this logistics company, but the information was sparse, the website was unprofessional, and besides this website, the caller couldn't find any other digital footprint. So this one's a little bit different than some of the other ones that we've looked at, but let's look at the red flags. So this scam contains some red flags that I didn't initially mention in my red flags list, but it has to do with the caller's smartphone caller ID. So many smartphones have a particular feature where if it's an unknown number, it might come up and say scam likely. Red flag, right? Your phone, your technology is saying that this is a scam likely, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why somebody might be triggered as a scam number. For example, if that number has already been reported, or if a single number is making dozens of calls in a very short period of time. But regardless of the inner workings of how our phones do that, if your phone is telling you that a job offer is likely to be a scam, you should probably think twice. Now, besides that scam likely note, there are some other red flags that we have discussed within this position, and largely for this one, it's around the company's digital footprint. So for starters, a large portion of a recruiter's job is to be in communication with prospective new hires. And of course, we've all played phone tag before. So imagine that a recruiter calls you, and then when you call back, they don't have a voicemail, but their whole job is to connect with potential employees. That's a little suspicious, right? Now, additionally, a recruiter for a company that barely has a website and no other web presence, that company is probably not real. Now, if we think about, for this case specifically, a logistics company, by nature of the business that they're doing, they need to communicate with people. They need to find new leads. They want to be responsible for delivering and sharing receivables and goods. And a lot of that, one, deals with external clients, but two, requires some kind of digital savvy, right? So a logistics company that has no reviews, for example, on like Google reviews or Yelp from other partners, and no website presence, and you can't contact them on the phone, highly suspicious. If you're watching this video, I assume that you're looking for a job, or you might think a position you applied to was a scam, or maybe you just want to learn more about fraud and scams in the internet in general, in which case talking about ghost jobs will be important for you, no matter which of those categories you fall into. Now, a ghost job is not technically a scam, but it's important to understand, especially if you're looking for a job. So a ghost job is a posting, usually it's online on like LinkedIn or Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, things like that, that appears to be hiring, but either A, it doesn't actually exist, or B, it might exist or it could exist, but the company doesn't actually intend on filling it. Now, we're not going to get into why companies do this or why ghost jobs exist, because there's a lot of different reasons. But I do want to mention 2 red flags that might indicate that you're applying for a ghost job. One of them is if the position has been open for months, and I'm talking like, maybe like a month, 2 months, 3 months, or even longer. It could mean that they haven't found the right fit yet, but that's a pretty long time for a position to be open. Now, again, by itself, that doesn't mean it's a ghost job, but if it's in conjunction with this next red flag, possible. So another red flag that a position might be a ghost job is if you see that there are thousands upon thousands of applicants. Now, again, there could be a lot of other reasons for that, but if you see these things together, so it's been open for a really long time and there's already been thousands of applicants, for one, it might be a ghost job, but for two, if you just kind of think about it mathematically, your chances of success there are reduced. We know how annoying it can be to fill in all of those different, so annoying that I got a little hair flip, fill in all of those different fields over and over and over again. So if nothing else, maybe just this should give you pause if you see this in your employment search. When you experience a scam, regardless of what type it is, you can definitely give us a call, whether it's an employment scam or not. We will gladly provide you with some resources and some insight to help you on your journey and moving past this temporary setback. So if you want to give us a call, you can give us a phone call at 800-222-4444, select option 2. The second thing that you should do if you experience an employment scam is, or if you think you experience an employment scam, is check the real company's website for a list of available positions. So if you find a job, maybe it seems too good to be true, but you're like, it doesn't quite align with all of Jess's red flags, so I'm not sure. Check the real company's website. Many employers will use job boards like Indeed and LinkedIn and things like that, but the real company's website should also have that position. So if you only see it on, for example, Indeed, and you don't see it anywhere else, probably don't apply, but that should also be something that you do, and there might be a way for you to report it to that employer to, again, keep people from experiencing what you experienced. Next, you should report this to the Federal Trade Commission. After that, if you found the position online, you can report it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3. And then lastly, if you found the position on a job board, you should report it to that job board. So for example, if it's ZipRecruiter, report it to ZipRecruiter. And then lastly, if you have provided your financial and personal information, you should consider contacting your financial institutions and perhaps taking some other steps to keep your identity safe, all of which we can help you with if you give us a phone call on the helpline. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you've learned something new today about fraud and scams, and that if you're in the process of looking for a new job, that this can help keep you safe as you try to embark on your next chapter. If you'd like to learn more about employment scams, visit stopfraudcolorado.gov or www.aarp.org/money/scams-fraud. For all of us here at Elder Watch, my name is Jessica Zawadsky. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time, and stay safe.